Boyle Sports. Don't just bet, choose wisely.
Hello and welcome back to On The Wire, brought to you by our partners Boyle Sports. And after a fantastic week of action at the Cheltenham Festival, we'll be putting the forensic eye over it with a fantastic bunch of guests looking through the Cheltenham Festival of 2025, looking at the eye catchers that we need to be taking out of it and the big thrills and spills of the week. So a fantastic show. Make sure to stay tuned. Before we start, our sponsors, Boyle Sports, have some fantastic offers for you to avail of. If you get a new account now, you can bet €10 and get up to €70 worth of bet credits. Make sure to scan the QR code on screen at the moment or look down in the description down below. There should be a link that will have all the T's and C's and all you need to do to get yourself involved. Bet €10 to get €70 free bet credit. What's not to like? Also, our sponsors, Boyle Sports, are making sure your customer experience is paramount, and by doing so, they are offering best odds guaranteed on singles and multiples. Again, get down in the description down below. You'll see all the details you'll need, but best odds guaranteed for singles and multiples. Delighted to be joined, as usual, by Dan Overall, Gavin Lynch and Mark Boylan for the show. Lads, a fantastic week, plenty of thrills and spills, plenty to get stuck into. I suppose we're going to look at the championship races first, so all the big races, which obviously caused relative chaos from a bookmaking perspective, and then moving into the novice hurdlers and the novice chasers before eye catchers at the end of the show, so make sure to stay tuned. We'll also be hearing a few eye catchers from Donn McClean at the halfway stage of the show, so make sure to keep around for that. Gavin, I suppose the big question, plenty of punters out there have had a bad week. How did you get on?
I won something small, Andrew, not a lot. I kind of set myself a figure every year, but I didn't get to that figure, that's for sure. The one thing I'll say is that thanks be to God for anti-post punting, because I think if I started last Monday or Tuesday morning, the day before the racing start, I definitely would have lost. Now, it's not a case that I backed a load of winners anti-post, but I just think it can get you into the right position. If you back a horse at 10-1, that's 3-1, you don't have to back it again. And then you might say, do you know what, I'll back something else just to cover the race. That's the kind of way I do it. So thankfully, that covered his face anyway. So yeah, won something small, Andrew, but won't be changing the car.
No, certainly not. I suspect for quite a lot of people. Dan, I was with you for a couple of days. It was actually very, very good competitive racing. It was just not necessarily the way certainly you would have wanted to have seen some of the results going.
I forget changing the car. I'm still trying to get the wheels back on my car after the way they fell off after the first day. Look, it started okay, but I mean, yeah, it really did go downhill fairly quickly. And it wasn't a disaster come the end, but it wasn't exactly the week I had planned for. I'd say humbling more than anything. Not so much due to the, lack of winners. It was some horses who were winning, who I generally just couldn't have given much, if any, chance to, who were then just bolting up. And I was there just left scratching my head slightly, saying, do I know anything about this game? But hey, we live, we learn, we live to fight another day.
And Mark, for yourself, you were on the Friday club after 4 days of punishing racing in chirpy form, so you must have had a great week.
No, pretty decent. Like Gavin said, anti-post made a difference there. So like when you get into a good position like that, it can help you to, well, it means it's harder for you to lose in the week, really. So look, I'm sure it was unpredictable results during the week. I'm sure we'll get stuck into it. But I thought at the same time, you go to Cheltenham, people say National Hunt racing can be a touch boring at times. You say in the lead up to it that we don't always get what we want in terms of clash as well. The unpredictability of it, for me, that was refreshing. Maybe not from a punting point of view for everybody, but if the day that the game starts to become easy or feel like guys have a handle on it, I think that's a dangerous one. I think something like this just sets the fresheners and everyone that you can't take it for granted ever. And we got drama. There was no shortage of that.
Well, certainly not, and we only had to go to the Champion Hurdle to find it on the first day. Billed as a two-horse race, really, between Constitution Hill and Brighter Days Ahead. Constitution Hill, we lost at the top of the hill. Brighter Days Ahead bombed out coming into the straight. Left to State Man putting in a superb performance, and he falls at the last as well. I mean, in Golden Ace, beats Burdett Road out there. I'm sure there's some jammy person out there that's backed a reverse forecast on the two of them at fancy prices. Gavin, I suppose, what do we make of the champion hurdle? It did slightly fall apart and certainly wasn't the spectacle we were hoping.
Brighter days ahead was very disappointing. Start with her. Obviously, they went too quick. It ended up that the Supreme Novices hurdle was 3 or 4 seconds quicker. So they went too quick. But at the same time, maybe it's just a case that her amazing performance at Christmas, the jockey didn't get a chance to look around that day and give her an easy time. She just didn't perform. Now, she got bet last year in the Mares Novice hurdle by Golden Ace, but at the same time, Jade Grugy had no problem running well this year, got bet in the same race last year. So first point of call is to say that she was very disappointing. She'll probably go over fences, but a lot of people will be against her at Cheltenham in future. Constitution Hill has lunged at the odd hurdle in his career. He was very lucky to get over the last in the Supreme, in the best Supreme performance of my lifetime. He just didn't get away with this one. And then Stateman, I'd say Paul, to me, he's the best jockey of the lot. And, it's less than 1 in 100 he gives a horse a bad ride. He gave it an okay ride, but just you'd wonder why he went to go for a big jump at the last. It was an ordinary meeting, maybe he wouldn't have, and he might regret that in time. But Golden Ace battled well and beat what was there, yeah?
Yeah, I suppose, Golden Ace was a fortuitous winner, Mark, but at the same stage, he was going to run a very, very good race in second behind Stateman. And, she's been rewarded, I suppose, for connections, especially the owner wanting to roll the dice in the big race.
Like, if you said to me beforehand, Andrew, I thought that the winner of the Mares hurdle should be in the champion, and I thought the champion winner should have been in the Mares. And if you had said to anybody when we were having this debate, thinking there'd be 4 of the big guns in the champion hurdle, the Stateman and Constitution Hill fall, yet brighter days ahead wouldn't be placed, you tell them to keep taking the tablets, wouldn't you? It was an outrageous result.
Yeah.
I mean, the mare, I know when he came down, he was likely going to win. But I think Paul Townend was keeping the revs up because he knew if he steadied him into it. I don't know whether there was deep reserves left. Gavin mentioned the pace of the race. It's obviously difficult to make up a thought of what the finishing speed percentage would have been when he comes down. But I can't get it out of my head how in the Irish champion hurdle he was so slow coming home. And I'm just not sure that definitely there was it was going to be a big performance from him. He was definitely better in the cheek pieces. And, Willie Mullins was saying Lossiemouth wasn't a champion hurdle piece of work. That must have been some gallop they did the previous week. If Stateman was doing what he did to Lossiemouth, and, it would have been as good as any grade 1 you'd see anywhere. But I think he needed to keep the revs up because the mare was coming. I still think he probably would have won, but I've heard some outlandish things said that it was going to be, double-digit margins that he's going to win by. I don't buy that for 1 second. I think she was finishing, would have got closer than that. But I'm just sorry for him. It's amazing the Stateman, all the grade 1s he's won. I think the day he falls and doesn't win the champion hurdle is the day maybe that he actually finally go up in people's estimations as a proper 2-miler. And Constitution Hill, where does it leave him? He's got to go to Punchestown now, but you're looking at and thinking for a truly great racehorse, you need to have a truly great CV. And he's now a horse that's won 1 champion hurdle. He's been seen, I think, 11 times in 1,200 days in his career. It's, when you're looking at the greatness debate, he's to get to 3 champion hurdles, even to match an Istabrack. It's a tough uphill journey to do that. And just tells you how good the great ones are, like Istabrack. You have to keep coming back every year. You have to keep showing up. There's more to greatness than just simply being talented.
I agree with Mark about Stateman. I think he would have won maybe 4 lengths at a total guess. But as Mark said, they had gone such a mad gallop. He was starting to get tired. So maybe that's why Paul kept up the revs. But there's no way he's winning 10 lengths. Not a chance.
Look, Dan, I suppose back to Constitution Hill, it's a very fair point Mark makes. And, I'm not saying he's going down that same bracket, but is he going down slightly the Duvan way here, where we're thinking what a brilliant horse this is, but we're not necessarily seeing it. We're not necessarily seeing him win all these races that we want to see him win. I just, we've heard it before with Nicky Henderson. We'll go to Punchestown at the end of the season, and there'll be a reason why he doesn't turn up, and then we're waiting again until November time for a fighting 5th.
Well, that's it. And Punchestown could turn out to be a really interesting rematch, effectively. I think Golden Ace is looking at potentially going over there. Obviously, on bare form, you'd think if they all turn up, she still has something to find despite her winning a champion hurdle. I get what you mean with the Duvan comparison. I think it's probably a bit too soon to be laying that into him. I think he's taken 1 fall. Who knows how it would have turned out in the end. Hopefully he goes to Punchestown and shows what he's capable of. And as Mark said, he's threatened to potentially have a fall like this in him. Such is his range, such is the way he attacks his hurdles. It's so efficient when it works, but it's always running that risk, as we've seen on the last hurdle in the International. There's always that potential. And the way these hurdles almost rebound once a horse hits them, I think that almost impacted him as well. So yet to be seen. Hopefully they will turn up at Punchestown, but I wouldn't be writing him off as a Douvan Mark II just yet.
We'll move on to the Champion Chase, where yet again more drama. There was drama at the start. The race, Mark, wasn't run how I expected it to be ran. I suppose everyone had it in their head. Solness has been so impressive, making all at Leopardstown twice. He could never really get to the lead and dictate how we know he can. Jonbon looked always slightly on the back foot. And it was my old pal, Marine Nationale, who was the one that actually throughout the race was the one you'd want to be on.
Yeah, this is a case of one horse doing everything right and things not going right for another. Like Marine Nationale was it was perfection, Sean Flanagan, the whole way around. And in fairness to Sean Flanagan, he had a tough 35 minutes earlier with Vanillier, and to bounce back and do what he did, it took stones now to do it. So fair play to Sean for getting back on an even keel. Marine Nationale just went so well from Jonbon. Nico de Boimba was pointing to the start has been problematic. Yeah, it was messy down at the start, but I don't feel that. Every rider had to fight their own corner down there. Nico seemed quite vocal with JJ Levin down at the show fence as well. And obviously, Nico mentioned the tape got quite close to him. I think it's Ruby Walsh even in his analysis pointed out Nico was coaxing the horse close to the tape as well. I kind of found, as you mentioned, the race unfolding. I thought that they would give him either a little bit more light or have him a little bit more forward. Solness didn't get to the lead, and Ergomi was probably the surprise one for me that went forward in that kind of bunch. He didn't finish ground too quick for him, and probably he's getting on in years as well. But I thought this got messier than it needed to get for Jonbon. He was kind of in traffic, and he's a spooky type of horse anyway at the best of times as well. I know he's mature, but back in the day in particular, he seemed to be kind of a gawky lad, and I just didn't think this went anywhere right from him. And look, I know he's got it per second. It's a distant second. Fair play to him for hunting around and getting it. But I just felt that, if you were on him, I was never thrilled with where he was really in the race. It just didn't. It was neither one thing nor the other. And for a horse who tends to like, I think, kind of that consistency and getting to be setting your sights in a fence, I just don't think it ever went right for him. I actually had a lot of sympathy for Codixius because I thought he was another one of the Henry de Bromhead horses who ran out of their skins this week. And amazing at Barberstown, chase form at Naas earlier in the year, 1-2 Codixius and Marine Nationale. Anyone thought that was the champion chase 1-2 on the day, fair play, you have my respect.
No, certainly not. You would have been hard pressed to see that. Gavin, I suppose, as Mark's pointed out there, Jonbon's been at his best this year, probably with more forceful tactics. He couldn't really get to that stage prominent wise where he could maybe dictate or maybe put himself into the race the way he wanted to. And you'd have been a little bit gawky on your short price from a long way out, even before the mistake.
Yeah, I'd say Nico was in a rage after a furlong because he's not in the position he wanted to be in. And same for Solness. Jonbon wanted to sit in the first three, a length, maybe 2 lengths off the lead. And then he's further back than he wants to be. So probably Nico decides, right, I'm going to make up a little bit of ground with the jumping. And he's put more pressure on him, and then he makes the dreadful mistake, a very similar mistake that he made for James Bowen in the Terrence House. Just things didn't work out. Like we had 7 odds on favourites at Cheltenham, only 2 won, and 4 of them got beat because they're jumping. And he was one of them. As regards the winner, the vibes, and I don't mean Barry Collin, but the vibes in the last week coming up to Cheltenham were very strong on Marine Nationale. He got his ground. He certainly has improved a lot as the season went on. Delighted for Sean Flanagan, really delighted. What happened in 35 minutes previous on Vanillier, it's not very good for a pilot. He's a qualified pilot. When he gives up the ride, and he's going to be a commercial pilot, I believe. So thankfully for him, although there's no sat-navs on a horse, there is sat-navs in an airplane, so that's good. But Marine Nationale, I presume, I'd say we'd all agree that he would have won, I suppose, 3 or 4 lengths if Quilixios did stand up at the last. And obviously, Marine Nationale and Jazzy Matty winning on the Wednesday regarding Michael O'Sullivan. I think when people talk in a year or two about the 2025 Cheltenham Festival, I think those 2 horses will be the headline more so than the Gold Cup or the Champion Hurdle. What happened that day, I had a tear in my eye anyway, which happens very, very rarely. And it was an amazing thing to see that the 2 horses that Michael rode 2 years previous ended up winning on the same day.
Yeah, it was bizarre, Dan. It did feel like there was kind of something in the air almost. You couldn't have written a story as kind of to work out the way it did, as that did.
Yeah, so it's borderline a scripted event, and if you were to read it on a script, you'd almost say, well, this is just a bit too far-fetched, really. Such is the unprecedented nature of the same 2 horses 2 years later for completely different connections, winning 2 completely different races. next to each other. It generally just, I don't even know how you'd begin to price up a reality in which that could happen. It probably would never happen ever again. And it did lead to the best scenes of the week. I think obviously the Wednesday, the attendance side of things has been well documented. It was quite significantly down. But I think in that moment, everyone realized they need to be in the parade ring watching that moment take place. A lot of high emotions, and it was a touching moment really to be there, and definitely the highlight of the week that I'll remember from the entire festival. I've said to you often, Andrew, this race is a bit cursed, and it has been for many years in terms of we don't necessarily see the race pan out as we think it should or how it might. In this instance, it was probably for the best that enabled a Marine Nationale to get a moment that I think we'll remember. On John Bond now, he's so been unfortunate that the Cheltenham Festival won too many times. I wonder if maybe he'll replicate Min in getting his long-deserved win, maybe in the Ryanair next year, if they insist on making Fatafala Gold Cup horse. To me, I think Fatafala will probably touch on, I think his natural speed lends itself to being a Ryanair horse more and more. I think putting up to 3 miles restricts his natural ability and pace. But if they insist on sending him up to the Gold Cup trip, JP's got a slot open for the Ryanair. That could be his redemption story.
So we'll move on to the Stayers Hurdle. Now, Stayers Hurdle, a race that plenty of people would have been all in on Teupo, me being one of those, and I just couldn't have seen a world where Bob Bollinger stayed. But he did under a fantastic ride from Rachel Blackmore. Gavin, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say people that put in Bob Bollinger to lay at, say, even money and 2-1 on and 5-1 on, I'd say come to the last, they're happy with themselves that, oh, this is working out perfect. But yeah, Bob Bollinger winning over 3 miles. Who would have thought that? Third run over the trip, all the evidence was that he wouldn't stay the 3 miles. Obviously, the decent ground helped his chance. Rachel Blackmore gave it an absolute peach of a ride. Brilliant ride. Last early on, as you say, everything went fine for Teupo. I think we're all agreed now. He did win once in Punchestown and say good yielding ground. He only beats our steering for Lange that day. There's no doubt Teupo is a far better horse than soft ground, like a lot better. And he has a squeak in next year's Stayers because there's very little around in the Stayers division. You'd have to say Home by the Lee was very unlucky considering that he beat Bob Bollinger at Christmas to be brought down or whatever, unseat rider. The Wall Park, that's the one I backed each way a while ago, ran really well. Again, was knocked about by the faller. Crambo got shuffled back, but no real excuse. The best 2 horses were first and second. As regards next year, you know, maybe a horse might come along like a Jimmy Desai. One of those might, you know, have a chance, but maybe even a Jasmin De Vaux, who's not a particularly good jumper. But this year, yeah, I think the ground played a huge part, and it was great to see Bob Bollinger win.
Yeah, Mark, as I say, if somebody had told me a week before Cheltenham, looking at the Stayers Hurdle, that they were going to back Bob Bollinger, a bit like what you were saying earlier about the people needing to keep up the meds, I'd have said, not a hope in hell will he stay at Cheltenham. And yet, you'd have looked at that race as a once-off and thought, there's never been a world where he doesn't stay 3 miles.
I think Henry Brown would nearly get me to stay in a Stayers Hurdle if he can do it with this guy. He's unbelievable. And I think Gavin Lynch this week, he was, we know he doesn't like old people. We know he doesn't like old horses. The only 10-year-old of the week. I'm delighted to see you hold it together so well, Gavin, in dissecting the race. But look, a fair performance. I thought Rachel Blackmore was the story of the Thursday for me. You know, it's been such a tough winter for her through injury, and I got such a kick out of seeing her get back on the stage and the confidence with which he rode this fella. I thought, I know the horses won well, but it was a peach now, and sizing up Jack from a fairway out. No, it was top stuff. But I'd echo what Gavin has said there in this division. I'd love to see some fresh blood come into it. As an 11-year-old next year, it's hard to imagine that he's going to be getting any better. Teupo as well, he would totally with you on ground on that front. I'd actually love to see Ballyburn come back and have a crack at the Stayers Hurdle. I just think, the chasing experiment, there's been 2 now of the 4 days have not gone to plan. And the way he's behaved himself over fences, I think if you could switch back to hurdles, ability wise, I think he'd match up very, very fairly with these. Like a horse like a Rocky's Diamond has run a great race back and forth for the Queedies, ran really well, but and the Wall Park has made strides from a handicap. I just think in grade 1 territory, Ballyburn, geez, he'd look very comfortable in that type of company. Maybe a double figure price, say, for Stayers, but maybe they will be adamant to keep trying down this road. But even on the Race IQ data, to give them a shout, I think he was beaten 8.5 lengths, but they reckoned there was 15 lengths last jumping in the Brown Advisory with them. It's not a like for like comparison when you're trying to make up ground consistently and burning energy to make up what you're losing. I think over hurdles, if you could just trap away, and even if you got a Jasmin De Vaux style ride that Town and gave him in the Bartlett in next year's Stayers in the same course, I think he'd be very, very interesting. But far be it from me to tell Willie Mullins what to do with a horse. That man knows exactly what he's doing.
That is fair enough. Dan, I suppose looking at the race, what do you make of it? Like, this is one of those that I assume, like, I know we talked about it on the Thursday night, I'd have just given this horse no chance.
Yeah, when I mentioned about humbling results at the start, this is one of them that I just couldn't fathom a world in which Bob was not only staying 3 miles, but staying it thoroughly well up the hill. I just could not have seen that reality unfold. But there was no real fluke about it. He did, and it's just a testament to... I mean, he's always been a horse of immense ability, but I think Henry, to get him to this stage, at this stage of his career, is testament to his as well. Tia Hooper, I think, will remain the standard setter in this division. I think he's pretty much run to his level. He's not an absolute superstar in terms of the performances he's able to put in, but he's run bang up to, I would say, the level that we'd expect him to. Ground potentially a bit livelier than would be ideal, as the lads have mentioned, but I think we know what he'll do next year. He'll probably almost have the borderline same campaign and hope it works out next year. There'll be a host of potential options to come into the division, as there always are when it comes to the Stayers Hurdle, but often we see them divert to chasing or they fall by the wayside, and it tends to be a bit of a muddling race, as it often is. But I'd be doubtful Bob could come back and do it again as an 11-year-old, but Tia Hooper will remain the standard setter, and remains to be seen who stays over hurdles to try and challenge.
Our partners, Boyle Sports, also have some superb offers throughout the day-to-day calendar. One of those being you can get money back if second to the SB Fab as a free bet on Boyle Sports on selected meetings. Make sure to click the link down in the description down below to find out more. But money back as a free bet if second to the SB Fab over on Boyle Sports. Well, Dan, we'll stay with you for the Gold Cup. It was the story of the week going into it. Could Galopin Des Champs win it 3 times in a row? Unfortunately, it just, as much as he travelled, coming into the straight, you were trying to convince yourself that it was going well. It just never felt quite as smooth as certainly as we've seen him at Leopardstown this year.
No, and it was a relatively small field Gold Cup, and as they set off, you'd have expected him to really be prominent at least. I mean, we know he's quite tactically versatile these days. Obviously, had been a front runner, but now can kind of sit anywhere. But in that field, knowing he is the best horse in the race, you would have expected a prominent position, and he was just never able to get into one. Now, whether that was a question of the ground being a bit too lively, which I think it unsuitably was for him, but he just never really looked happy. A few pretty slow jumps early on, and he didn't get that position. As you say, it only really felt that around 4 out, where he then started to move into contention, got to just behind the leaders and took it up over. You thought, this is the Galopin we thought we know. But I think those early signs were more obvious than we actually wanted to believe. And in the end, he's come to the straight. He's hit the front, but has been swept aside by, I know the way you're thinking, the progressive horse, the supplemented horse who they've managed extremely well. Obviously, for his novice campaign, he was tenderly handled, won a Kimyor doing handstands, won a Grade 1 at Aintree. This year, again, he's been similarly eased into it in open company, and they've always had a lot of admiration and respect for the horse and haven't wanted to overextend him, but they've delivered him to absolute perfection on this day, and this is by far and away a career best performance. And as his age allows, the best is only in front of him, and potentially might need this kind of ground, but he's shown pretty ground versatile in the past. Just an incredibly impressive performance, despite galloping clearly underperforming slightly. And I think Monty Starr performance almost summed up my festival to a certain extent. I think I put him up as the anti-post better when we first did the episode of the season. I mean, around 33 to 1, 25 to 1, goes off 8 to 1. I think, we're probably not going to beat Galopin here, but we're going to get a place. He makes an atrocious error at the 9th, and Rachel somehow managed to sit on, and he's been pipped into 3rd by Gentleman's Game to get 4th. So couldn't even get the each-way returns on Monty Starr, kind of summed up the week. But an interesting Gold Cup, not the Gold Cup we perhaps wanted to see, but I know the way you're thinking. We now have another potentially top-notch progressive horse with time on his side.
Yeah, very much so, Gavin. I remember being on one of these shows around a month and a half ago when you were very keen to back this horse without Galopin Des Champs for the Gold Cup. Did you think he had that ability and that type of performance in him?
Good question. Just to go back to Mark there for a minute, he said I don't like old horse and old people, but I think he might have meant just horses. And as regards the old people, I kind of have no choice because I qualify now for seniors golf over 50, so I'll have to put up with them. As regards, I know the way you're thinking. I just loved his performance in Leopardstown in the Irish Gold Cup. Wasn't knocked about, shall we say. And I think it's a remarkable training performance. Gavin Cromwell gets all this family. He's trained this horse from day one. His jumping over fences, when you saw him last season, like he ran in a handicap chase in Leopardstown before he won the Kim Muir. Fair enough, he was having a spin around Leopardstown maybe, but his jumping was terrible. And even early on in the Kim Muir, his jumping was poor. And this season has been to get his jumping better, basically, until this point, until the Gold Cup. And for presumably Gavin suggested JP to supplement him for whatever the 25 grand. Just a remarkable training performance to get this horse to win a Gold Cup. He's only 7. He's got a massive engine. For me, all week, the ground was too quick. Like, this is the quickest Gold Cup in the last 6 years, 6 minutes 40. Last year was 7:05. The previous year for Galopin was 6:45. Galopin is 9. Obviously, he was never traveling a yard. I was watching it I watched the first 3 days at home. The Friday, I watched in a pub with some friends. And I just said to them after 2 or 3 fences, I said, this favourite's in trouble. He just was way too far back from where Paul would like to have him. But the ground was maybe too lively for him to be able to lie up with the pace. But what a remarkable horse Galopin Des Champs is, to get himself into contention and to push himself all the way to the line. He was 12 lengths clear of third. I personally think that, I know the way you're thinking, I'm going to back him for next year's Gold Cup. He's the right age. If the ground was even softer, I think he's even got a better chance. So I think he's not bomb-proof because of his jumping, but I love his profile. I think he'll have a couple of runs next season. And don't be disappointed if he gets beaten with John Durkin or gets beaten in Leopardstown. The fact of taking him out of Aintree, I think, is a super idea, because it's taken him so long to get his jumping up to a 7.5 out of 10 level that if you confused him by going to Aintree to different set of fences, it could upset him for next year. So I think that's a really good idea and very patient from the owners, etc. I love the horse. The vibes were on the day that the camp were very bullish about him. That's the vibes I was getting. And they were right.
Gavin Cromwell was very quick to talk about Keith Donoghue's kind of effort with this horse throughout the season. He's ridden him in the previous couple of starts and probably getting his jumping to the required level it was needed at the Gold Cup. I suppose to a certain degree, I'd looked at his season and looked at the race at Leopardstown, and I know it was a Grade 1, but it didn't look like he was off a yard. And I was thinking Grand National, and this thing's going to go and win. I thought he could run a very good race in a Gold Cup. I didn't believe he quite had that level of ability that he's shown last Friday.
Well, it's funny, it would have been sweet putting up this horse without through the festival. But the time I got to the Friday, having spoken to people in that camp, or, around the yard, it wasn't just they thought he'd run well, they thought he could beat Galopin. And I was kind of thinking, right, well, I think more than you could see him running really well, but their confidence was another notch on again. And this performance didn't surprise them as far as I can see. How well in was this horse in the Kim Muir off 145, lads? Oh my God, if he could turn back time. But he's a fair tool. And I think Galopin ground is exactly as Gavin has said. It feels like that, but also I wouldn't underestimate. He's had 2 arbitration going back to Gold Cups. There's a reason it's so hard to do. There's a reason when Album Photo was doing it that he was having a spare in season. I don't believe it was the difference in winning and losing. Ground was the thing, and I also think he made a very talented horse, so I won't be underestimating. I think he's very, very much an improver. But I wouldn't be shocked if next season, would they go at it a little bit different? Could you see a little set of headgear on him in a Gold Cup? Could you maybe see him with a lighter campaign, and just from a point of view of, if you do like another way you're thinking, as Gavin does anti-post, I wouldn't be surprised if he, as he said, could get beaten John Durkin. But we do see in that market an overreaction at times. The Galopin possibly go to 3 or 4 to 1 after getting beaten the John Durkin this year. It wouldn't shock me if something similar to happen again. There's a little nudge out. Guys can be eager to get the early season horses tightened up in the market. I just wouldn't be. Anything can happen between now and then. Obviously, we could lose a key player. But then there might be a little bit of value anti-post wise if you're willing to kind of see the bigger picture at that early stage of the season with one like him.
We'll move on now to the novice hurdlers for the week. We won't probably go into them quite as much as we've done there, the championship races. We wanted to give them the love they deserved. We've got the Supreme, the Turners, and the Albert Bartlett. Kopek de Board winning the Supreme, the New Line winning the Turners, Jasmin De Vaux winning the Albert Bartlett. Suppose coming to you first, Dan, looking at the Supreme, I wasn't sure, was it a really good performance from Kopek de Board, and is William Money a lot better than we think he is, or was it ever so slightly, and I mean this ever so slightly, underwhelming in comparison to what we saw at Leopardstown, where he put in a performance that looked incredibly freakish.
Well, Leopardstown was, say, on the extreme end of potentially, I think a few didn't run the race. The ground was a bit softer, which obviously exaggerates winning distances. Obviously, ground all week was pretty decent. But I think when you look at, say, Romeo Coolio back in third, who maybe hit the front a bit too soon after work ahead faded quite tamely, the front three, I think, are clearly all very useful in their own right. William Money has performed again. He's stepped forward again. We've always known he's been very talented. Barry Connell last season was very adamant he had the best bumper horse in the country, which probably wasn't quite true, but his ability, I don't think, is questionable anymore. And I think the first time Hood statistic, which got thrown around quite a lot as a big negative going into that race, the first, second, and the fourth, all wearing a hood for the first time. It's something I think we're going to have to get used to. Willie Mullins in particular has shown that he seems to love a hood these days. A Mystical Power wore one last year and ran a great race as well. So I don't think it's really the negative that people potentially still view it as. I mean, Quebec de Board, I think he's still learning, as you saw with that jump at the last. He's still not the complete article. So whether they go over fences so soon or whether they remain over hurdles remains to be seen. But his talent is undeniable. To do that on decent ground was very impressive. I think he's already shown a real tendency to handle softer ground. William Money is probably going chasing as well as a 7-year-old going on 8 next year. I thought the front three pulled nicely clear. I thought Romeo Coolio is generally quite a benchmark horse. So I thought the front two had shown a pretty impressive level of form there.
Gavin, looking at Quebec de Board in relation to potentially the New Lion, who won the Turners, beating the Yellow Clay, Final Demand back in third, all three of kind of the market principles coming to the fore in that race as well. How would you compare and contrast? Like if you wanted one of those going into next year, what form line would you be more willing to look at and say, I'd prefer to pin my colours to that mass than the other?
I think I'd give the two of them a rating of 159 at the minute. That's what the BHA have given. So look, two brilliant horses, very hard to choose. I don't think they'll ever meet. So I'm going to get off I've an easy way of sitting on the fence here. The New Line probably go Champion Hurdle. I'd imagine Quebec de Board will go for the Arkle. Quebec de Board, his Jumping Christmas was bad. It was good at the DRF. It was okay here. Mistake of the last, owed William Money. The three of them from the Supreme might go chasing. And as we saw in this year's Arkle, it comes down to jumping. So I know he's finished a length and 3/4 ahead of William Money, but 1 or 2 jumps can change all that. William Money didn't have the best first half a mile or mile in the Supreme. He got messed about at the second. He was a bit wide. No big deal, and the two of them made a mistake at the last. But I think they're two really good horses. William Money stayed very powerfully up the straight. So whatever jumps the best could win an Arkle. The New Line, yeah, he wins over 2.5, but he looks all speed. Harry was doing the in and out with the racing cars again. I don't know what's going to happen someday when New Line has nothing to run around 2 or 3 of them, so he'll get confused. But he's a class act as well. They're two really good novices. If you can get to a level of 159, like you're only probably 10 pounds off a Champion Hurdle horse. So they're two very good novices.
Yeah, Mark, they looked two very good novice races on paper, and I was very glad, especially in the Turners, to see, the 3 market principles pretty much jump in the last as one. I suppose the one that I took out of the race, possibly the most, was the Yellow Clay. I don't know, I underestimated him going into the race. I wasn't sure what the Nace form was really worth, and he was well backed on the day, and he just wouldn't go away. He was an absolute pest for the New Line, and I suppose going over fences and maybe over 3 miles next year, he might be some force for a Brown Advisory.
The market was screaming his name all morning, and Chile on the New Line relative to that. If he thought he'd go off third favourite on the day in the lead up to the race, you'd think something had gone wrong. But it was a fair effort from him. Now Mark got it right, and look, I know it was a long week for Gordon Elliott. He got his winner for a finish in the Martin Pipe, but he actually had an awful lot still run well, with the exception of kind of a Brighter Days Ahead blowout. You're looking at Stellar Stories and Better Days Ahead, been second, third in a Brown Advisory. Tupu, the Wall Park, second, third in a Stairs. He's Romeo Coolio was just touched on there as well, and Dowie ran so well. I'm probably leaving others off, but he's had an awful lot actually go very close to the mark. Just kind of finding one's too good. The New Line, the jump at the last, I'd say you had your heart in your mouth watching him there. He did take a little bit of a guess, but he just must have a massive engine. I have to say, Quebec de Board, I felt he would win more impressively than he did on the day. I still think it's all in front of him, because he's not one of these kind of point-to-point schooled horses coming from that very early schooling. nor is he a French horse who's been in that system from early on. You can see that in his jumping still. So I feel there's probably an above average level of improvement in a Kopek de Board by virtue of where he started off from as a horse. But the New Lion he went up another notch for me again here. And Final Demand, I was disappointed. Maybe time had proved there were two very, very good horses in front of him, but physically he has the shape of a horse. He's almost a bit of a shell of a horse. He looks like one that is summer's grass, and also coming back with another strength of a year, we'll see him better. He could be a decent chaser, but I thought he might be a little bit of a higher echelon to get closer to them. He probably went down on my estimations a bit during the week. But no, they're good. Great. I think better Supreme than last year as well. We'll say that. I think it was a much, much better Supreme than we've seen maybe in the last couple of years. I thought he could do something maybe not quite appreciated like Kopek, but I thought he'd do it a little bit better maybe. That's just been picky when you have big expectations.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think you're well entitled to do so. I think you raise a good point with Final Demand. I just feel an awful lot. I've been watching plenty of reviews of the Cheltenham Festival, and there seems to be this kind of general sense that Final Demand's going to be better than the Yellow Clay next year over fences, and I don't necessarily buy it myself. Looking at the Albert Bartlett as well, Mark, again, another horse that I was adamantly against in Jasmin De Vaux, couldn't have had him in a fit. But I suppose the writing was on the wall when Townend rode him, I felt, because I was thinking to myself, he's hardly going to put himself on this horse half an hour before Galopin Des Champs if he thinks A, he's a no-hope, or B, he's going to fall on the deck. And he proved one of those rides that Townend sometimes gives on the new course that just defies belief. He just has so much belief in the horse, in himself, and he kind of was never getting beaten from a relatively long way out.
And even Cargisi in the same card. I mean, the filly's running keen, and someone else might try and tuck it in and bury it. He gives it light. He is in that position for a reason. He's as good as anyone around. And when you look back in the history books, he's going to have an incredible CV by the time he wraps up. But yeah, proper ride in Jasmin De Vaux. I don't think it was a brilliant Albert Bartlett, but it was deep in terms of field where things could go wrong. The Big Westerner didn't get the bounce of the ball. I don't know if it was the difference in win and lose. I think she had a chance to regain, and I'm not sure she was unlucky. But I think in terms of experience, the Jasmin De Vaux factor, where he is a pointer who's gone and had it was a 7th or 8th run of his life, and he's been to Cheltenham last year, won a bumper, experienced all the hustle and bustle. Sounds like they've done umpteen bits of schooling with him. The Big Westerner is coming off a small field win in Limerick. Now, she won a maiden hurdle before that as well, but she was very much more unexposed, likely race filly. I'd be encouraged about her now as a chaser next season going forward. Jasmin De Vaux has to still get his jumping act sharpened up again. He did it when he needed to here, but I think more will be required. And if you do send him over a fence, it's going to ask another question of his technique once more. Maybe he'd respect them, but maybe he'd puke either. You don't know what he'd take to it just yet. So I suppose he's one that I wouldn't be back in anti-post for a Cheltenham race until I get a view of more offensive as the way they go. The Big Westerner, yeah, I'm encouraged by what she did now. And she's not just a mudlark either. Limerick wasn't as deep as we traditionally see it. And I thought she was one to upgrade from it. I know she's quite short for a mare's chase, but she definitely stays. There's more of a gap to Fairyhouse this year. She could be on for that grade 1. And it just wouldn't shock me if she took decent enough rank among the staying novice chasers next season.
Somebody who had plenty more trust in Jasmin De Vaux than myself was Donn McClean, who put him up as one of his best selections for the Cheltenham Festival for the Albert Bartlett Novices Hurdle. And we're luckily going to hear from Donn yet again, who's going to give us a few eye catchers and a few horses that he believes to take forward from this year's festival.
Here are my 5 horses to follow from the Cheltenham Festival. We'll start off with Active Authority, who actually ran in the last race on the last day of the festival in the Martin Pipe Condition Jockey's Handicap Hurdle. And I just thought that he did really well to stay on as well as he did, to take second place behind Woodhull. Woodhull, she's 7 for 7 now over hurdles. We just don't know how good she could be. And she won well, but she could be top class. She's only 5. And to finish second to her, time may prove that it was a really good run by Active Authority, getting just £7 from her. And more than that, though, it was the way that he did it. He was well back in the field early on. Unusually for a Martin Pipe Hurdle, it wasn't a really strongly run race. A finishing speed of 106% tells you that it wasn't a disadvantage to be up close to the pace. And Active Authority was actually 16th or 17th jumping the second last flight. Lewis Saunders moved him towards the inside on the run around the home turn. This 2.5 miles trip, it's a good trip for Active Authority. Ollie Murphy's horse, he obviously saw it out really well. He'd be interesting now back over 2.5 miles, a strongly run 2.5 miles, or even going up to 3 miles. It wouldn't be an issue for me. It was a big price here, but he outran his odds by a fair way, and he's a horse who could be worth keeping in mind and following. The second horse is Meyertown. He won the Ultima Handicap Chase, and look, he's not under the radar or anything like that, not anymore. And he was really well backed for this. He got into his rhythm from early, unlike a couple of other horses in the race, including Grandeur Dame, who missed the break and didn't get into his racing rhythm early on. But Meyertown just got out in front for Patrick Wadge and jumped really, really well. But the key for him is that he, even though he had the run of the race, he finished off his race really strongly. He was over 2 seconds faster than the next fastest horse through the last 4 furlongs. He was fastest by far through each of the last 2 furlongs by over 1.5 seconds and 0.76 seconds respectively for those last 2 furlongs. And he won with plenty in hand. This is only his 5th chase, so there could be plenty more to come from him. And look, he's going to get a whack from the handicapper all right. He was racing here off a mark of 127, so there's plenty of leeway there, and even off a revised mark, he could be interesting in another handicap. The third horse then is Nürburgring in the Jack Richards Novices Handicap Chase. I thought he did well again. It was a race that was dominated from the front. Caldwell Potter was very, very good from the front. He got into his rhythm early on, and he stayed on really well, a finishing speed percent of 107%, but he was handy. He led most of the way, or nearly all the way. Anyway, Ken Budd's horse ran a massive race at a massive price to finish second. He was handy the whole way. O'Moore Park, who was third, Willie Mullins' horse under Sean O'Keefe, he was handy the whole way. Nürburgring was a little bit further back. He kind of raced in mid-division early on, and he had to come wide into the home straight. He stayed on well to take 4th place. He only just missed out on catching O'Moore Park for 3rd place. As Perfecta, who was 5th, he was handy from early as well. So Nürburgring, he's really the only horse in the first 5 who came from mid-division or worse and was able to get in among them. And he's a classy horse. Obviously, he's a Galway hurdle winner. He's got a chase rating in Ireland of 140, which is £10 lower than his hurdles mark. He raced here off a British mark of 143, so that's still £7 lower than his Irish hurdles mark. And if he can just continue to improve in that fluency over his fences, then he could take a good step forward. He's got a fair amount of leeway there from his hurdles mark to his chase mark. And even if he can be as good over fences as he is over hurdles, then that given his hurdles mark, that suggests he could be a well handicapped horse over fences. The 4th horse then is Rocky's Diamond, who ran a massive race in the Stairs hurdle. He was way under the radar, Declan Quealy's horse. He was a big price. He's only a 5-year-old, and no 5-year-old has won the Stairs hurdle in its current guise ever. So he did well for a young horse. He was up with the pace early on. It was a kind of a stop-start pace, but he kept on. Even after he was passed, he kept on really well. Look, Bob Ollinger ran out a really impressive and a really popular winner in a 1-2 for Rob Kerr with Teahoe finishing second. The Wall Park stayed on to finish third. But Rocky's Diamond, he stuck to his task really well to take 4th place behind those 3. And just you think that maybe with another year under his belt, or as he continues to improve or continues to mature, then he could be a horse who will take a leading role in Stairs hurdles in the future. I'm not sure what the plan is from yet, if Declan Quealy is going over fences with him or if he's going to stay hurdling. But if he does stay hurdling, then he could be an interesting staying hurdler now for next season. The final horse then of the 5 is Take No Chances, who I thought did well to finish 3rd in the Mayor's hurdle. Look, Lossiemouth, as we know, ran out a really impressive winner, and Jay De Grugy finished 2nd behind her. But Take No Chances again, it wasn't a strongly run race at all, a finishing speed percent of 110%. And Take No Chances, she likes to be held up in her races, she usually is, and she was held up again here, and she did well to stay on to take 3rd place behind Lossiemouth and Jay De Grugy, and she wasn't that far behind Jay De Grugy for the runner-up spot. The Lossiemouth and Jay De Grugy, they raced in 2nd and 1st places respectively through the race. They finished 1st and 2nd. She's had 13 runs over hurdles, so she's not obviously unexposed, but she's been in brilliant form this season. She finished 3rd behind Woodoo and Joyous in that race at Cheltenham in December, and obviously would have came out and won the Martin Pipe Hurdle. Joyous ran a massive race, won the William Hill Hurdle at Newbury. Then taking her chances, went to Ascot and Big Carghese, the county hurdle winner. So the form, her back form in the recent past this season is very, very strong. And this 2.5 mile trip, it's a good trip for her. She's got form over shorter as well, but she's a kind of a this. She stays 2.5 miles well. She could get further as well. She can probably be marked up at least a little bit on the bare form of this run. She continues to be in really good form, and maybe in a race in which she gets a stronger pace at which to race over this intermediate trip, then that could see her take a nice step forward again.
Great to hear from Donn McClean, who had a typically good Cheltenham Festival. We'll move on to the novice chasers, and the Arkle looked to be a race where nobody could see Madgeborough beat. But as Gavin has said previously in the episode with the champion chase and with these novice chasers, it only takes a mistake or two over 2 miles at Cheltenham for it all to go wrong. And Madgeborough did make those mistakes, Gavin, and unfortunately it led to him losing the race.
Absolutely, yeah. There's 8 hurdles in the Supreme. There's 13 jumps in the Arkle. First 9 fences, he was okay. No big problems. And then he made mistakes 3 out of the last 4, including a horrendous mistake 2 out where he left his hind legs in at the back of the second last. If he'd jumped the second last, or even he'd a chance even if he'd jumped the last quite well. But yeah, down to jumping. Keith Donoghue gave Only by Night an absolute peach of a ride to get there, a furlong out, and gets absolutely mugged by Django Bay in the end. So brilliant ride from Nico. He tried to mix it with Madgeborough early on. He soon realised that was a bad idea. Couldn't go the gallop, let the horse find its feet, and came home late. Yeah, brilliant ride from Nico.
Dan, I'm going to be slightly controversial, but in light of Madgeborough's mistakes, and, you know, he made a mistake at the top of the hill. He made a mistake at 2 out. He made another mistake at the last. I'm being brutally honest. I don't feel this form is worth a bag of nuts.
Well, when you've got a 5-runner Arkle and 4 of them are separated by, a length and a half, and they almost finish in a quite neat diamond formation in the end, you have to be somewhat sceptical. I think it's a strange race because I think Loda Sodders ran bang up to his best and probably had the least excuses out of all of them. He's been beaten a length and a half and has finished 4th in a 5-runner race. So the Skeltons probably can't quite believe what's happened to them. Only by Night has travelled into the race supremely well. Say Madgeborough's been beaten by his jumping, and we alluded that maybe his technique lacked the style that perhaps you'd like. The data suggested he was so quick away that he might get away with it, but clearly there are lessons to be learnt with him, and maybe given he looked a bit of a stayer as a juvenile, he'll be better over further. Say what the bare form is worth, I'm not so sure. And this was the sign to me that this week was going to be challenging, because I would not have given Django Bay much of a hope at all. I was so surprised he got backed into 5-1. And when he got headed early on and was almost borderline detached, I thought, oh yeah, no, things are just clicking into place. And then he does that. And I had a good friend of ours backed Only by Night and was very cocky for her. So in a way that filled me with a bit of joy seeing her get pegged like that. So it was a race of real contrasting emotions. But yeah, we'll say what the bare form is worth, I'm not so sure. And Madgeborough clearly the best horse in the race, but let down by some pretty dramatic mistakes.
I thought Dan was a nice guy. Jeez, there's an edge.
No. The thing is, Mark, I went through enough pain this week. I need some other people to have pain. So I just need to look back on that and remind I'm not alone.
Yeah, well, God forbid somebody landed a decent touch on Only by Night. Look, Mark, I suppose looking at the Brown advisory, you mentioned with Ballyburn maybe going back down a stairs hurdle route. It just didn't happen whatsoever. I'd turned the corner to Ballyburn after being against him all year, and I actually probably just should have stood by my guns. But yet again, if I'd gone against him, the last horse I'd have turned to was Lecky Watson.
Lecky Watson, my God. Yeah, I have to say, right, you talk about anti-post value at times, we're always trying to identify things at different spots. This race took on a different complexion when Ballyburn started to harden as he did. I wouldn't have minded him at 13-8 the week before, but at 4-7, he was a very, very different proposition that wouldn't have been as appealing. But this horse, even Lecky Watson, I think he was cut to 10-1 after he won his final start at Punchestown. And he was 28, so you could have backed him at 5 or 10 minutes before the off. He goes off 20s, I think. You know, it just goes to show you. I think this was a little bit out there of a result, but he's a useful stare. He's not a mug of a horse at all. But the favourite did disappoint. There's no getting away from it. I think actually in the circumstances still showed an engine, even if it didn't work. The Elliott 2 have run well. I still think there's a bit more to come from Stellar Story. But you know, to Sean O'Keefe, it goes to show you when you are riding for Willie Mullins, you always have a chance in any of these grade ones. I thought Gorgeous Tom actually ran okay to a point. Maybe the mid-range trip might be a little bit more of his cup of tea than this, but still a horse that could be one to have a decent end to the spring between Punchestown Punchestown or Aintree. I will say Dancing City, disappointed with him, but the market was saying that before, and I think he had an SP in the exchange somewhere around kind of 12.45. That was very, very chilly for a horse that was shorter, second favourite, not a million miles off Ballyburn in all the build-up. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he left that behind, because the market just seemed to be very, very chilly on him.
Yeah, certainly, Gavin. He was the one that plenty of people were going to take Ballyburn on with, and he was going to do a general 3-1, 7-2 chance for the majority of the week leading up to it, and kind of seemingly just drifted and kept drifting and ran a poor race. It didn't look to me like we had a range of future Gold Cup horses running up the straight there in the Brown Advisory.
No, I don't think so. I think Lecky Watson is available there, the best price 33-1 for the Gold Cup, and I don't think we'll be knocking the door down even at that price. But he's a very honest horse. He jumped brilliantly. It's hard to believe he won the Brown Advisory so well. The Jolly, as we said, jumped poorly. His made a mistake in the 5th. He was horrendous at the 7th, and then it was kind of game half over. I counted 6 mistakes that he made on the way around. Dancing City was poor. You think that maybe, he wants softer ground and more of a test of stamina, perhaps, but he had won a decent ground in Punchestown. But he jumped okay till 3 out, and then he was just gone in 10 stride. So he was very poor. Probably not the strongest Brown Advisory, similar to the Arca.
Dan, what do you do with Ballyburn? I know Mark has mooted at maybe the Stairs hurdle trip. Again, I don't want to be over-egging it, because he's only ran poorly once or twice in his career. But are we a little bit? Does he quite stay 3 miles? His jumping doesn't seem up to it at Grade 1 level overall. There's an awful lot of questions at the moment about where you actually end up turning up with him.
Well, I think in time he'd have the potential to stay, no problem. But he was just back to all of his worst traits here, having looked more tractable at the DRF. He jumped better. I mean, for the first mile or so, he had his head basically on the floor at Cheltenham, back to his very usually low head carriage. He jumped terribly and did everything wrong. Was still only beaten, the best part of 8 and a bit lengths, which is a testament to his ability. And they've alluded to a potentially slight drop back in trip, ride a bit more positively to maybe utilise just his natural enthusiasm, the way he travels. But he needs to brush up that jumping. But he jumped fine at the DRF, so I wouldn't be riding off as a chaser completely just yet. You say it's a bit of a strange race to look back at. I think if you're looking down the field, the likes of Stella Story, Better Days Ahead, maybe you're looking at like a real top grade handicap for those. They say Gorgeous Tom, maybe something like the Galway Plate, something like that, considering he needs decent ground. I don't think it's a race we'll potentially be looking back on as a real standout Grade 1 contest. I mean, there might be handicaps to one with a few of these, but both novice chases, despite obviously getting rid of one, you'd say probably a bit underwhelming in terms of the probably bare form we've seen.
We're moving on now to the eye catchers. Usually this is the 60-second selections at the end of the show. We're instead doing 60-second eye catchers, up to the guests to have as many as they want during that time, and hopefully horses that they can bring forward for future festivals or maybe going in to next season. I have just 2 that caught my eye on Friday, one being in the Triumph Hurdle, a filly of Willie Mullen's Place de la Nation, or Place de la Nation, no matter what way you want to say it. She's the type of horse I'd be intrigued in if she stayed a novice for next year. Maybe one for the Mayor's Novices Hurdle. She travelled into the Triumph almost like the best horse, ended up coming 5th for Danny Gilligan. I think she's definitely one to keep on side for Gigginstown. And a horse that I know quite well, who ran, actually, I thought an excellent race in the Martin Pipe, was Park of Kings. Ended up coming 5th. The Martin Pipe, usually a race that ends up going to proper graded horses, and Woodoo, I don't think, is booking that trend. She could be a Mayor's Hurdle horse this time next year. Park of Kings is a handicapper. I think he knows what you're going to get with him. But I think with a 2.5, maybe even 3 mile decent ground handicap, whether that be at Aintree or Punchestown, you're going to get a good run for your money. I do think there's one of these big ones in him, so I'm certainly going to keep him on side. He got a bit too far back, flew home for 5th. So Place de la Nation and Park of Kings, the 2 to come out of the festival for me.
It's Park of Kings, Andrew, sorry.
You know what? It was the same man that brought up a 4th festival winner last week, and that was fantastic to see.
Deadly Paul.
Mark, as you're so chirpy about Paul Nolan propaganda, you can take the floor next.
That was fantastic. And in fairness, talk about rides of the week, I have Barry Stone on Daily Present. wherever Derek O'Connor went, he was in his shadow. Really, really good, worth watching back again. As for the two eye catchers, I'll throw forward. I think Gavin has a list as long as his arm for you. I'll keep to two. I thought Now Is the Hour wasn't totally done. I'm not saying he definitely would have won, but he don't think he was done with when coming down 2 out in the National Hunt Chase. And Gavin Cromwell this week, for all that he had the two winners, this could have been a very different week. Brides Hill second, Company Sergeant second, 6.5 second, Robbie's Rock second at 50s in the Boodles. Only by Night trades 2 to 9 in a second in an Arkle. Midnight and Is Vanilla, Melina Girl, Mozzie, all placed. But I thought this guy was going to run a big one. I think when he gets back to Ireland without the extra penalty as well, that he has the BHA handicapper, there could be a real nice race in him over here. Don't know whether he's an Irish national type horse, but if there's not a big stay in chase to be won, but Now Is the Hour, I'd be shocked. And the other one I put forward, I was in the Albert Bartlett, Derry Hassan Paddy for Lucinda Russell, a horse they really, really love, but very much unexposed. And I think he's doing it all on kind of raw ability at the minute, rather than being kind of anywhere near the finished article. They've gone on to Aintree and won with the likes of a High Senior, even Apple Away, that grade 1, the Sefton novice hurdle. I could see this guy being that kind of mold of horse. They seem to love buying that 3 mile stay in chasing type for the future. I really think Derry Hassan Paddy, in the circumstances, the horse with such little experience, in an Albert Bartlett that typically rewards a battle hardened profile. He'll be one for me. I'll be really looking forward to next spring. Maybe he's your ultimate horse for to do the Marathon all over again, and your Corach Rambler.
Yeah, well, I'd say listening to Lucinda and Scoo talk about this horse, I think they'd be disappointed if he's running in an Ultima next season. He's a proper horse. I agree completely with that. Dan, who would you take out of the week?
Yeah, a few. We've touched on a few of these already. I think Rocky's Diamond in the Stayers Hurdle for a 5-year-old ran a mighty race. Probably got there a bit too soon at 2 out, but despite looking like he might be beaten a fair way, he's kept rallying up the hill, only beaten about 10 lengths in the end in 5th. As a 5-year-old, I think he has significant scope to improve, and if nothing else comes into the division, he could be the one that takes that step forward. We mentioned her, I think Mark as well, particularly was keen on her, the big Westerner in the Albert Bartlett. She got unlucky. As I say, I don't think that was winning and losing, because I think Jasmin De Vaux edged out more in the end, but she's travelled through that race extremely well, handled the big field impressively, given her lack of experience, and she was quite keen during the early stages. I think you could drop her back to 2.5 miles and she'd cope with that. Chasing next year, I can't wait to see her over a fence. And I agree with you on Place de la Nation. I thought she was a massive eye catcher, and there were some whispers around her that she might be pretty decent. I don't think anyone expected it to be this good, but outside of the winner, the form would look pretty solid with obviously Hello Neighbour there, Lalamba and East India Dock all surrounding her. So that would stand out, and if she can progress on that next year, she'd be a Mayor's Novice Hurdle contender. Amsterdam, you can get at 25 to 1 and 33 to 1 for the Arkle. It's easy to forget the regard in which he was spoken about only a couple of months ago. He was around the same price for the champion hurdle that State Man was. Obviously, a bit of an injury. They said they might be able to get him back for Punchestown, but they're not going to rush him. Obviously, he'll be 5 going on 6. French spread, had experience in France. You'd think he'll be going chasing sooner rather than later. The level of form he's already shown would suggest he'd be more than up to that kind of standard. And you don't get many opportunities to back a Willie Mullins horse with that kind of profile at such a big price anti-post. So I thought it around 25 to 1, 33 to 1. Amsterdam would make a fair bit of appeal at this stage.
Very good, Dan. Moving on to Gavin Lynch. 60 seconds, and I've backed the unders on 8.5 of how many eye catchers you can make in 60 seconds.
I'll go for first one is Wendrock in what used to be known as the Boodles. Stayed on from a long way back, was carrying top weight, was only beaten 7.5 lengths. Will appreciate a step up and trip. Next is Vanillier. As we said, the pilot, things didn't go wrong. Excuse the pun. Things didn't go well for Sean Flanagan, so he has to be an eye catcher. Liberty Hunter, I thought, was travelling nicely in the champion chase, might have been placed. Next one, calm down, Andrew. It's a Paul Nolan horse, Conyers Hill. Finished 6th in the Grand Annual. Will definitely appreciate softer ground, so don't forget about him. El Kairos, I think is how you pronounce it, was 5th in the bumper for David Maxwell. He rode it, so must be a very good horse. Next one is Nürburgring. Beaten 8.5 lengths in the novice handicap chase, finishes 4th. I didn't back it because I was very afraid of its jumping, even though it had been an eye catcher. But that smells and shouts Galway plate all day long. The next one is Place de la Nation that you mentioned. Really good run and is a novice for next season. Wendigo was a bit unlucky in the Bartlett. So was the runner-up, but Wendigo might have finished 3rd. The next one is Art of Authority that came from miles back in the Martin Pipe, was 16th, turned into the straight, and ended up finishing 2nd. A really, really good run. Have a look at that one. And then Now Was the Hour is the last one, as Mark suggested from the Tuesday. Definitely would have been 2nd, but if that horse gets soft ground, he'll win a long distance handicap chase. Thank you. Bye.
That is some effort. That is really what we must aspire to in episodes going forward for myself, Dan and Mark. But thanks to the three guys, as always, it's been really good to chat about the Cheltenham Festival. It's been an excellent year thus far. We're not done yet on the wire this year. We'll be back for the Boyle Sports Irish Grand National preview, which is coming up in a couple of weeks' time around Easter weekend. The Boyle Sports Irish Grand National on Easter Monday itself, which will be a fantastic couple of days racing at Ferryhouse. So we'll join you then. As always, hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, do subscribe to the Racing TV channel down below. As always, look at all the offers from Boyle Sports down in the description. We'll see you then. See you again very soon.
Boyle Sports. Don't just bet, choose wisely.